So let's start with neuroanatomy today, right? And how we're gonna start this topic is that I'm gonna build a foundation so strong that you guys will be in shock that how do you understand neuro so well? The important thing is that we must understand the foundation by first why, then we'll understand the real answer why the neurons exist, what neurons are. Then we understand membrane potential action, synapses, organism, what the hell this word is, organization, right? Then we understand organization of the whole neurons, and then we understand the embryology. Now I will not go too deeply inside this topic, just a little bit. We'll just skim it so that we understand why certain way the brain exists. Okay, embryology answers this question, that why frontal lobe is frontal. If someone asks you that, hey, why is it frontal, why couldn't it exist in the posterior side of your cranium? So that will answer that question, and then in the end we'll understand the whole orientation. Like we'll integrate all these little topics, and then we'll have a very amazing foundation to understand neuroanatomy, right? So this is a neuroanatomy foundation course, and sit tight because it's gonna be a long video, and I'm gonna talk a lot on fundamentals, and let's start, right? Okay, so everything, right? Everything, the foundation, right? Everything starts with the basic question that why does the brain even exist, right? Why the brain exist? I wanna think about that, right? Why the brain exists? It's a good question, right? Now to answer that, now you would think that, wow, I have a lot of answers. Now this sounds a silly question, right? This sounds like a silly question, but it's actually not. It's probably the most important question in this whole neuroscience, right? Like a lot of books will say that neurons and brains and everything, it consists of this, consists of that, they'll give you a whole structure, but they'll not tell you about the why brain exists, right? They'll not answer you this question. Now to answer that question, I want you to close your eyes and travel with me. I want you to close your eyes, and I want you to imagine Earth even before brain was there, right? Imagine life about, I don't know, 700 million years ago, right? So we have a life, right? And we have life 700 million years ago. At that time, we had no humans, right? No humans, no fish, right? No mammals, no birds, right? We just had these tiny little organisms, right? And these organisms, right? And we had them. And the question is that, do they need brain? These tiny organisms? The answer is why. But the answer is no, right? But the question now arises that why they don't need brain. Because it turns out that they don't need to move a lot. These tiny organisms, they hardly moved. They simply just floated, attached to some rocks, absorbed nutrients, divided, right? So life was simple, right? So simple life requires simple control. This is the first layer of the whole question, that why brain exists. So simple life needs simple control. That's how we can think about it, right? Now the second layer you want to think about it is that, hey, you told me that they don't move much, right? So they don't move much, right? So less movement, right? So this assumption that less movement, right, gives rise to another question that, hey, why does movement create neuron system then, right? So it means that movement is the foundation of brain, right? We can kind of assume this thing, right? Is that true? Would it be right to assume that? I mean, let's just imagine, right? Again, imagine you're a tree, right? Now, does a tree need to decide whether to run or not run? Does a tree need to catch prey? Does a tree need to avoid a predator in a jungle? Right? The answer is no to all of these questions. Plants can wait, right? But animals, on the other hand, cannot. The thing is that movement the thing is that movement creates something which is called as urgency. Movement creates urgency. Now, urgency creates the need for rapid information processing. Okay, so you need to process a lot of information. Because you have urgency, and this rapid need to process a lot of information, that need eventually becomes a nervous system that gives a foundation of brain, right? So that's how we have this answer that, hey, if someone asks you that, hey, what is your name, whatever your name is, hey, Mr. Shashwat or Dr. Shashwat, why do you think the brain even exists? Well, brain exists because life needs urgency, and to have that problem solved, you need to process a lot of information. Now, to process a lot of information, you need to have a brain, right? Now we have an information problem, right? Information problem. Imagine you're the first worm, right? You're the worm. You're just moving in jungle somewhere, on a tree, on a bark, on a stone maybe, right? And you suddenly detect that you have food. You have a food somewhere, I don't know where, but it's there, right? Now, what must happen? What do you think, right? You're a worm, right? And you're like, oh my god, we have a food. Now the food exists, right? Now, once you feel that food exists, you need to detect it. That's very important. Detecting it is very important. Detecting it, right? You need to detect it. Then you need to really decide that, hey, should I move or should I not move, right? Then you need to decide. And then you need to especially move as a worm to eat that. And then only you're gonna eat that food, right? Now, these are actually 4 different problems, right? The first problem that we have right now is to detect that food. How would you detect that? Then you have to process that detection, right? That process is called decide, right? And I mean, you process that you understand, you're trying to understand this fact that, wow, it's a food. That's also an information, right? And then you have to decide that, hey, should I move or should I not? And then we have to move. The moving is also a problem for us because it needs brain, right? So where I'm going with this whole flow is that our brain, right, solves 4 type of problems, right? So in other words, I can say that we have 4 jobs for nervous system, right? It doesn't matter whether you are a jellyfish or a mouse or a human, right? These 4 jobs are exactly same in all living beings. The first job will be sensation. You want to detect something. That's called sensation. What is happening, for example, right? The light, the sound, the touch, the pain, right? Temperature, blood glucose level, stretch receptors, smelling, tasting, everything. Without sensation, there is no information, right? Second job will be integration, right? Why or what does this information mean, right? That's the brain's greatest job, all right? If something touches your hand, should you ignore it? Should you scratch it? Should you run away from that touch, or should you touch it back? That's also a very good thing, right? Sometimes someone touches you and you want to touch them back, right? So this is also a good thing to understand. Now, brain interprets that. So the second thing that brain does is called integration. The third thing that your brain would want to do is the decision itself. Okay, decision. What should I do? right? That's the decision. This is called computation, right? Millions to billions of neurons, they work together, right? And they compare this decision, they compare the memory, the emotions, the environment, and the stimulus, the past experiences, right? And what is the probability of expected reward, right? And they calculate the risk as well, and then they choose the action, right? So that's the decision. And the fourth thing that your brain and that every brain does is called response. As a snake, your response can be to bite that human, right? As a human, your response can be to shoot that, I don't know, animal, right? Or run away, right? The decision must come to fruition or action, right? Maybe you want to move a muscle, you want to release insulin, you want to increase heart rate, maybe speak, right? Smile, I don't know, laugh. That's everything. Everything is a response, right? Without output, thinking accomplishes nothing, right? Suppose you're designing a robot, right? The question here is, what must it have, that robot? Exactly same for component. It must have sensors, it must have a computer, then it must compute to take the decision, and then it must have some sort of motor output, right? That's your response, right? This humans, especially us, right? We are simply performing these four things, and we are just made up of biology instead of silicon, right? I would like to think this way. Now, let me introduce you to a word called electricity, right? The electricity. It's a cool word, right? Now, why didn't evolution uses blood to carry every signal, right? That's a cool question. Imagining touching a hot stove, right? You're touching that thing, and if the signal travel as fast as hormones, right, you might move your hand several seconds later, right? But too late. Instead, neurons use electricity because hormones are slow, right? Movement of blood is slow, right? So that's the reason why neurons use electricity, right? And electric signals travels in milliseconds. That's like rapid signals, right? And they save lives. So we have another question. This question is, why electricity in neurons? Because it's fast. It's about milliseconds, right? They are fast. Blood is not fast. Hormones are not fast. That's the answer. But then you would think, hey, wait a minute. If electricity is so good, why do hormones even exist then? I mean, I would think like that. Why do hormones exist at all? Because not every message needs to be fast. That's the answer. Let's compare touching a fire, right? There's a stove, and you touch that. You touch the fire, and in milliseconds, the electric signal, they move, and you will be like, oh my God, let me remove that hand. Okay, so that's first example. Second example, we're gonna compare that touching the stove to growing taller, right? Growing taller takes years, right? This is because of hormones. Evolution uses this right tool for the right job. So hormone solves a different problem than electricity. Okay, so you would think that okay, Shashwat, I understand this whole integration. Let's come back to the neuron a little bit. Tell me more about neuron. Okay, the first thing that I thought about neurons is that why don't we have a single neuron? That'll be nice, I think, right? Why not one giant neuron? I thought about it. Why not just one neuron, right? Imagine one neuron extending from your toes to your brain, right? And another from your brain to every muscle. Would that work? I think not so well. Now, why? Because imagine you damage that particular neuron. Your entire system fails now. Instead, evolution or God or biology, it evolved and it built this network of billions of neurons, like redundancy, flexibility, like learning, repair. And one coolest mechanism of neurons is called parallel processing. Now this is very cool. and we'll know why. So it has something which is called as parallel processing, okay? And this architecture makes us intelligent, right? This architecture makes intelligence possible, I should say. Then I just use that word, that hey, okay, why not giant neuron? Because of the risk of damage, right? You'll damage that neuron and then you're like messed up for your whole life. Then we ask ourselves, you just told Shashwat that this whole architecture makes us intelligent, right? What is intelligence then, Shashwat? Intelligence. What is intelligence? How would you define that, right? How would you think about it? Well, a lot of people will say that if you ask them that, hey, what is intelligence? They'll say that intelligence is ability to think. Okay, that can be a okay answer, but let's think about it deeper. I think intelligence is ability to build an internal model of reality and use it to predict future outcomes, right? That's called intelligence. For example, someone throws a ball at you. Your brain doesn't react after the ball hits your hand, right? It immediately predicts where the ball will be. And that prediction, not reaction, is one of the defining feature of high nervous systems, okay? So what is intelligence? Intelligence is when you build this internal model of reality, okay? I mean, if you didn't had eyes, there'd just be darkness, right? They're just atoms, and they are structured in this way, and then when light hits them, it hits us back, right? Light goes, it hits that particular structure of atom, it hits the wall reflects that light, comes back to us, then it goes inside our eye, and then we have this theater going on inside our eyes. We have this capturing device called retina. It captures that, and the thing is that it captures every bit of it. That's why when you look inside someone's eyes, it's black, right? Except the corneal color. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about inside. The eye is black because no light comes back. There is no reflection coming out, right? So that's why it's black. And what's really happening is that we are just building that internal model of reality. Reality is can be quite fake, right? Imagine you start hallucinating, right? Now your reality is changed because your internal model of reality has changed, right? So intelligence is that you have that internal model of reality, and then you use that model to predict that, hey, I think I need to catch that ball, right? Or hey, I need to run, right? Because there might be a tiger, So that's called intelligence. Not just thinking. Thinking is not intelligence. Using that information of the model of reality that you just experienced, and you just use that and you predict that maybe I should start studying for my exam because okay, maybe I need to. That's called intelligence, right? Now if you will open up a human and you see you touch that brain, you will find that brain is very squishy, first thing. Second thing, you see that brain is very heavy, So this question arises that why the brain is so large or heavy, right? It's so heavy, right? Why not have brain of a mouse? Because humans perform these super duper complex tasks, right? Social cognition, imagination, tool creation, right? Mathematics, everything. These functions require these huge number of interconnected neurons, right? So it's insane, right? It's insane. I mean, it's amazing how it is, and it just boggles my mind that my mind is studying my mind. And it turns out that we have around 86 billion, not million, billion neurons, each forming these thousands of connection with each other, each neuron talking to each other, creating this complex communication network. So all of these 86 billion neurons are talking to each other, and it's happening in the real time, right? So a common misconception here a lot of people have that, hey, brain tells the body what to do. That's actually half true. Most information flows into the brain, yes, and the brain spends some time on that, like understanding it, rather than commanding it, right? Millions of sensory signals are there, right? They come to the brain, they arrive continuously. The brain filters that and prioritizes it, and then predicts, and then responds. So brain has these four things happening, right, all the time, and it does in real time, right? Continuously it's happening, right? Now let's break the system, this system of sensation, right? This is my system, right? This is my system of brain. If someone asks you what's the function of brain, sensation, integration, decision, and response, cool, right? And let's imagine, what if humans had muscles but no sensory system? Could you walk? Well, you could walk, yeah, but not really, because without sensory feedback you wouldn't know where your limbs are. This, we call this thing at proprioception, the ability to understand where your limbs are. That's called proprioception. That's actually wonderful. Not a lot of organism in biology can do that, trust me. So what if you had muscles and no sensory system, no proprioception, no sensory system of where your limbs are, whether you're falling or not, right? Whether you're touching something hot or not, right? So these movements require sensations, right? What if you had this sensation but no motor system? Well, you would receive everything from the world perfectly but could never respond. That's catastrophic. What if the brain processed information but had no memory, right? You understood every moment that, hey, yeah, this is a color black, yeah, but every moment would feel like the first moment of your life, right? There will be novelty, whatever you want to call it. There will be this feeling of new all the time, right? The problem that arises after that is that you can never learn. You can never learn the pattern of things. Learning a pattern is also intelligence, and you will never learn any pattern. Every experience would be a new experience, right? What if these signals traveled at hormonal speed? What if we didn't? What if we just had hormones instead of electricity, right? That'll be that'll be so bad, because imagine you're driving and you see a child on this road. Imagine you just had hormones. The child is dead 10 seconds later. So so whenever we think about brain, we want to think, okay, which part of the brain is broken? Is it sensation? Is it integration? Is it decision? Is it response, right? So loss of sensation gives us numbness, okay? Loss of integration gives us these things called neglect, aphasia, agnosia, right? Loss of decision making gives us frontal lobe syndromes, and loss of weakness of these responses give us paralysis, this kind of things. I'm just giving you this, I'm just sensitizing you to this information, okay? So this completes our first chapter, right? First video about why brain exists. That's a good thing to start upon, okay? So if you enjoyed that, just leave a like, I don't know, and let's continue that, right?